why would any designer want to use recycled material? They could quite easily just go and buy one of the many millions of grades of different polymer that are out there from a virgin polymer producer, stay comfortable, stay where you've always been. One of the big points we think is this idea of all materials in the world becoming scarce. Scarcity is an important factor. So what's important is knowing that you've got a supply which is sustainable, which will be there next year and the year after and the year after that. We hear a lot of talk about the circular economy at the moment. It seems to be one of the sort of big buzzwords, and I see senior managers in large organisations saying, we really support the circular economy, we're going to do everything we can. Actually, they need down in the engine rooms of those businesses to actually start doing something and demonstrating they really are doing things. And at the moment, I think we might be guilty of quite a lot of talk at the high level and not so much real hard examples of activity lower down. So there's enough good recycled material out there now that you really can demonstrate that you can put your money where your mouth is and do something about it. Clearly there's a carbon impact story, which is a strong one. We've measured it all. We know that typically our recycled polymers are about 80% of the carbon impact of taking oil out of the ground and making a virgin polymer. But actually, if I'm honest, it's quite hard just to sell on carbon impact. It's not a buying reason, it's a nice also ran. To get into things that really convince people to buy, one argument that I found very strong recently is if you start talking about price volatility, anyone who's fabricating a product which is made from a large amount of polymers, if they try and look forward at what their raw material cost is going to be for the next 5 or 10 years, there's a massive amount of uncertainty, probably predicting a raw material price that tracks the oil price, and the oil price is traditionally tracked upwards. So if you can come up with a product which breaks out of that market and gives you a chance to have long-term price stability, that's really, really attractive. Sometimes that price for a high-quality polymer will be less than what the day's rate is for the oil, but you have to also accept, because there's high volatility in oil pricing, sometimes there'll be a dip down and the oil price might drop below your sustained polymer price. That's when you really have to work with your supplier, because he'll ring you up and say, I want it cheaper today, and you'll have to say no. We think that products that contain recycled content also have strong consumer appeal, because people have begun to understand that if they spend their money to buy something, they want to know that the materials come with a kind of green commitment and some certification of the fact that they come from an environmentally friendly place. And they tend to trust the brands and the retailers to do that. So sort of the word I've got is this idea of it being what you might call cool green. I want to buy a quality product, but I want it to come with these credentials that make it nice to own, that I'll be proud to talk about it. And this is a really good example. This is a range of Electrolux vacuum cleaners. And they looked at the market and thought there is an opportunity there because they understand their consumers. And so used a lot of recycled plastic, excellent. But also at the same time, designed the product to be very low energy, designed the product to be very low noise, made it very efficient in its dust filtration, so that they're kind of layering on and building up this really strong story about how environmental the product really is. They had a real problem. The lady who talked to me about this had a real problem selling that internally to her own company because it felt like a risk out of their comfort zone. In the past, they'd only ever done products that was like small developments but still looked like all the ones they're already selling. So to go right over here and take a big stance that was in another place was quite hard. But after a lot of pushing and shoving and a lot of effort, starting to get results like this. Huge growth in New Zealand, 30% of the brand being sold from that range. That says an awful lot about the awareness and acceptance by consumers to products that are really, really strongly designed for environmental reasons. So how do you go about doing it? For me, one of the key things for any designer is to really challenge the client brief. And that's, you're basically your paymaster. You've got to engage with them and say, well, yeah, I know that's what you wanted last year when you issued model 27B, but maybe for model 28, why don't we take a little bit of a step out, try and do something different and new? Often, people just aren't aware of the benefits. I just put up a whole slide of things I thought were good reasons for having recycled content. People aren't aware. In your design, I think it makes a lot of sense if you can come up with a design where you don't go for every single component, go back to the materials interface, and so I'll use PC-ABS for this, and I'll use Norral grade for that, and I'll use nylene for that, and I'll use glass field for that, and before you know it, you've got this mishmash of polymers in your product, which make it inherently unrecyclable at the end of its life. Disassembly is key. We still see products that are incredibly hard to take apart, and yet there are some little examples of people doing sensible things. I think the trunky suitcase, the kid's suitcase that came back from China recently, when they brought the molds back from China, they took out all the screws and clips and fixings and made it a snap-together plastic design because it suited the need for lower labour in the design, but it also made it inherently more recyclable. Keep labels and printing to a minimum. Try and avoid paints and lacquers if you can, and also think about the bits that are really going to wear out and replace them. My briefcase at the moment is on its 4th set of wheels because Samsonite stupidly said they'd guarantee it for life, not expecting somebody like me who rings them up every 6 months and say, I need more wheels now, please, because I've dragged it along so many things. And as an example, here's some parts that we made out, I think it was ABS, and this was a PC-ABS for a really nicely designed radio. So you can actually marry together attractive, beautiful design and still use recycled content. There are some constraints. You know, if you move to a new range of materials, you have to accept that there are some constraints. One of those is typically most recycled plastics are the pure polymer. I've got some ABS, I've got some PS, I've got some PP. You don't get anyone who's kind of said, oh, I've recycled a special grade 27B of Norral that's a blend of PC-ABS and a special grade, and that you don't get that. So it tends to take you back to the pure, earlier defined polymers that aren't so complicated, not the complicated alloys. You're going to have a limited colour palette, there's no doubt about that. If you take all colours and mix them together, you tend to get blacks or greys, but in some streams you can get a white, and you can then actually produce quite a nice range of colours. So it is doable, it's just that the colours might not be as bright as they would have been if you started from a natural. Most of these polymers here, if you really analyse their background, they'd probably be a compound of about 800 different types of plastic. So what you tend to end up with is medium-range physical properties, a mid-range, medium-impact polystyrene, not one that's at the extreme limits. But it's probably very consistent. So once you learn what the properties are, you can get a consistent feed. Surface finishes are typically going to be low gloss or matte. If you think back to that range of vacuum cleaners, it wasn't all the bright colours, but it still looked an attractive product. For some polymers, you may get legacy additives that you're going to have to deal with. PVC with cadmium stabilisers, plastics from waste electronic equipment with small amounts of legacy frame retardants in them. Those need to be dealt with, but if you work with a professional organisation, they will have dealt with those points. You're not going to find much medical stuff. There is some good food grade material, but it is less common because it's so hard to hit. The other thing that I would recommend anyone to do is to really ask the person you're buying from if they can verify the source and origin of their materials, because it suggests a real professional approach to manufacturing, and also the fact that they've probably got a long-term stable in-feed. If they don't know where it came from and what it was, I would tend to shy away from that. As an example, I picked one of my own grades, why wouldn't I? This is PS01's developed from fridges, but recently we've worked on it to make it a toy standard product. So what we did is we always picked up this phrase, must be as good as virgin. It's a real nice selling point, but immediately you have to substantiate and back that up with some real knowledge that it is as good as virgin. And I looked back the other day at what we've done. We've got all our internal ICO physical properties, which have been verified externally. We've got EN 71.3, which is about migration of chemicals out of toys if kids lick them and eat them. We've had a full risk assessment done by an external lab to see what SVHCs on the REACH high candidates list might be in our product with a low risk return. We have an in-house XRF machine that we use to monitor heavy metals and bromine. We've had the answers of that externally verified, both by these two well-known companies. And we've had the origins of the product, the supply routes audited by UL Labs, and all that's been done twice by two leading petrochemical companies. A lot of work for me, but look where I am now. I've got a defendable, certified grade, which is as good as virgin, with a rock solid set of evidence that backs it up. That adds value. I've learned a lot about adding value in this market over the years. And in the early days, I thought I'd get a salesman and say, go out and sell plastic. And he worked here. All he did was talk to the moulders he knew and tried to sell them recycled polymer. And he ended up having debates about price. What does it do? Can I get some tomorrow? No sophisticated discussion about carbon impact or sustainability or circular materials or attractiveness. And what we've learned over the years is the things that sell my product, these factors, sustainability, greenness, brand value, style, design, all that, happens at this point. End users buy things from retailers they like. Marks and Spencer's customer buying from Marks and Spencer's. End users buy brands. I always buy Sony TVs because I like them, they last a long time. What that means is that the end user influences the retailer influences the OEM. I want the OEM to tell the moulder what to use, and I want the moulder to knock on my door and tell me, I want to buy some of your stuff. So the effort for my marketing goes down here, and that getting the message of the value across there is really hard to do. Now, what does that impact on a designer? Where do they fit into this chain? Clearly, they've got a strong relationship with the OEM, making a TV for Sony or a vac for Electrolux. They've probably got some understanding in the retail sector. Design me a pack that fits in this configuration on that much shelf and get it just right, get it collated to the shop floor. And they'll obviously understand the limitations of the moulder, you know, what mould size, Quite familiar working in that territory. But I don't think they do a great deal to actually understand what the consumer wants and what's turning consumers on. And I know they don't do a great deal to talk to recyclers and find out what's there. So if there was one message to all these designers who are here today, it would be open up these channels of communication and learn. Because you've got to take this straight linear model, get these ends and bend them into a circle, otherwise we ain't going to have any material. The trends that are going on in the sector. Well done, well advertised, it's held up there as a sort of flagship of what to do right. PET from bottles going back into PET bottles. And what we see there is, you know, milk bottles now, 15% maybe, getting on that way, recycled content. Cola bottles with 25% are there. And that's about a commitment from this industry. The dairy sector really committing to the milk bottles. Massive, great branded organisations actually investing in recycled content. And what that does is it builds long-term stability in the market and it concretes in the desire, and there's a sort of en masse movement together. In the PP packaging sector, we're starting to see food-grade PP that's being collected quite largely in the UK being turned into good quality but more generic polypropylene. So you might get food pots, tubs and trays going into things like paint pots. Well-established model being done by a recycler at the moment. There's been some demonstration of food grade with PP, but at the moment I think that's next year or the following year's technology. Nobody actually making a food grade PP right now. Pots, tubs and trays are the big growth sector in collection, and with the targets in the UK that just has to come from pots, tubs and trays. Bottles are well on the way and are going to tail off in the next few years. But what I do see is that in this sector, not enough focus on what to do with the low-grade mixed polyolefin section in terms of developing market drive. Films, very early days. The numbers that are recorded for films recycling are pretty much coming from the C&I group, all the pallet wraps and plain pallet covers. That gets counted and gets a PRN, but actually the true tonnages of post-consumer film that are being recycled, very, very low, although one brave company is stepping into that market space as we speak, and that plant's being built down in London right now. So bottles being done. In the WE sector, what I've seen there is actually still a relatively low level of uptake. The example I put up from Electrolux was really great, but nothing like the level of uptake of recycled polymer that you'd expect to see for a set of legislation that's been around 7 or 8 years, which is quite disappointing. Most WE plastics tend to get smashed up, exported as low-grade mixed materials with very low levels of yield of good polymer. I see the focus on what I call catnip. Cheapest available technology, not involving prosecution. Because if the producers who have been made responsible, if the producers who were originally called the polluters when it first came out are made responsible for paying it disposal at the end of life, that's exactly what they do. They want to write a cheque at arm's length and pay someone else to dispose. And that delinks them from the ownership and getting the value out of the material. So if there was one message there, I think that we do really need to revisit whether the legislative instruments in this sector are actually bringing around what we want. I think they've concreted in a linear model of consumption because the producer just pays for the disposal. It doesn't create that drive for circular economy. End of life vehicle. Legislation at the moment says you should recycle 85% of your car. By January 2015, that's got to be 95% recycle or recovery. You're only going to do that if you actually get good value materials out of the polymers. You can't do it with just the metals alone. PST must be implemented. Post-shredder treatment. Sorry, I'll put that in. It will be a term that comes up. Unless there's proper post-shredder treatment plants put on large shredders across Europe, we simply won't get anywhere near this target. And so there is major investment going in this area, which is good. What's nice about the sector is the urban mine is incredibly well stocked. You drive past it every day. 2 million new cars a year, probably that number come off the road. Massive great stock of cars. So there's an identifiable, touchable source of material in the mine above ground. And also, as the new cars come on stream, they've got even more plastics in them. What a fact! So as you go deeper into the mine, it gets richer in plastics. What a fantastic mine that is. There's already high volume recycling plants, so a lot of it comes together in one place. That's really great. That means you get significant volume, you get a mass of material that you can invest in. If there's lots and lots and lots of small recyclers, people taking cars apart, you don't get the critical mass to justify an investment in a plant. And I've heard that the UK market is soon to be the second largest in Europe for manufacturing cars. I looked at it, it is huge, 6.8 billion. Toyota, Honda, BMW, Jaguar Land Rover, lots of truck manufacturers and coach manufacturers, massive industry. So, we're having a little bit of that, thanks very much. Here's a part from a BMW Mini, which is an air vent that lets the air go out the back of the car when you turn the fan on really strong. And when you're driving along with the fan off, it doesn't suck exhaust fumes into the back of the car. And this housing is made with polypropylene. We developed the product with PP from packaging, and then when we brought on stream our plant that does car recycling, we've replaced 80% of it with the PP from cars. So we've got a product that's 80% car PP, traceable. The other 20% is a packaging PP that adjusts the flow to just the right level to give the injection mold filling properties and nice surface finish. In the construction sector, lots going on there really, but they don't really sort of shout about it so much. PVC windows, we run Reco Vinyl in this country. Great example of capturing an engineering polymer and getting it back into the product again. So it's there, it's available for designers to use. Flooring, as I said, we run Reco Vinyl and Carpets Recycling UK. People challenging what the flooring's made out of, setting up new business models of recycling flooring back into new flooring, getting people on board to collect things and capture things, which is fantastic. Damp-proof coursing, every building's got to have it. It's not the sexiest product in the world, but it's a great product to use recycled material. British Polythene Industries are doing that. Pipes, drainage, roofing, masses of usage there. And curbstones and things like street furnishing, good examples of recycled content. And there's where the designer can go in and make those things, and there's a massive amount of polymers they could use. Just a quick example, there's a success for you, look at that. Collected PVC over that period of time, huge number being recycled, audited, collected, managed, good success. So where do you get the stuff? I'd say start at the BPF. They've got these excellent buyer's guides. If you go on the website, there's a buyer's guide that's entirely about where to get recycled plastic, and in there you'll find the 47 largest recyclers in the UK, instant access to 90% of the UK's market for recycled product. The magazines are good, Materials Recycling Week, if you flick through there, stories, advertising. WRAP have a lot of guidance in this sector, can point you in the right direction. If you've got a problem, they'll know where to send you. Even the Virgin brands now, if you ring up and demand, I don't want just pure oil-based polymer anymore, I want to make my TV out of a grade that's got 10, 15, 20% recycled content, they're all starting to bring in the brands, which is a really important message. There are materials libraries. We reckon we've sent stuff to all these libraries in the past. MatWeb, Materia, IDES, this one in France, and they set up a library of their products that you can tap into. And even United Labs have started a listing which is specifically, they will certify the recycled content and are creating a list of products that are of known recycled content. So there's no excuse for not knowing where it is. Or, if you're really thinking outside the box, why don't you actually capture your own product at the end of life, engage with your client and say, look, we've made all this stuff, why don't we come up with a model where we get it back at the end? They do it with photocopiers, you could do it with laptops, you could do it with vacuum cleaners. There's masses of opportunity for the designer not just to challenge the design of the product, but actually challenge the whole design of the business model, how it's sold and how those materials come back. Stop doing buy, make, sell, dispose, but actually get that going in a loop. Summarising, challenge the norms, designers. So if your client's name is Norman, and you can just go up to him and have that joke about challenging a norm if you want to, but that's life, he may or may not like it. I pointed out that I thought the market drivers were very strong. You might even argue they're inevitable, they're unavoidable. Start thinking about a circular materials flow, not that linear model. Benefits are multiple. Go back to slides 7, 8, and 9. Lots of good reasons for using recycled content. Quality is proven and it's being done with really good technology. The machinery and equipment manufacturers have really learned how to make this work. The availability is definitely increasing. There's more being collected, there's more coming through. There's a huge mine of cars out there I can tap into. And prices will be much, much more stable than if you stay linked into the oil sector. Thanks very much, everybody.